Well, I want to thank everybody for being here. This was something that Fred and I started talking about putting together, and I'm excited to be here with all of you from Barbados and all of my friends and fellow entrepreneurs from Bloomington, Indiana. It is it's a great opportunity for me to hear the stories of entrepreneurs and to share them with you all from Barbados. And I want to welcome you here to Bloomington, Indiana, and look forward to engaging with you today and hopefully into the future as you pursue this work towards entrepreneurialism within Barbados. And also want to thank Oliver Winery for making this available. It is, Oliver Winery is one of the unique stories in terms of tourism and also in terms of taking something like winemaking and making it into a business in some place like Indiana. And I can remember first meeting the founder of Oliver Winery. He was a law professor of my dad's and then a law professor of mine. And Bill Oliver Sr. was a great man, and he had a passion for winemaking. And so this has great memories for me of just being here is really terrific. And I think you'll enjoy hearing the story. We're going to take a wine tour later and find out about what it's like to develop an industry of winemaking and also tourism right here in Indiana. And I think what we have today is going to be really exciting because the entrepreneurs that we've brought together today, we have service providers, we have education industry providers, publishers, technology, medical device, and so it's going to be a great cross-section of founders of entrepreneurial companies. So we're glad to have all of you and welcome you here. And Dr. Bruce Jaffe is going to say a couple words as well.
Thank you, DJ. I guess first of all I want to thank DJ for putting it together and giving you a nice overview of successful entrepreneurial activity here in Bloomington for a variety of different industries. I too, I guess the advantage of being old is you sort of know back to some of the founding of some of the businesses, and I too knew Bill Oliver Sr. as he started the business. And there's two aspects. One, sort of a passion and drive that he had and commitment for winemaking, but a critical aspect that he and all entrepreneurs deal with is various government rules and regulations. And it was very advantageous to him and the business that he was a law school professor because he was able to see where various state laws and regulations were not conducive to small businesses in general, but winemaking in particular and wineries. And he got some of the laws changed in Indiana to really encourage the growth and development of the wine industry in the state. And there are now, probably a good dozen functioning wineries. So this is one of the largest in the state. And then I got a plug for his son, Bill Oliver Jr., who is a Kelley School of Business graduate with an MBA, who saw the opportunity to expand it, as DJ pointed out, to see the tie between winemaking and tourism as a destination. I've been to a number of wineries in California, and this actually wine tasting area is better than the vast majority of wine tasting rooms in the famous California winery area. And in addition, it has one big virtue that most of the wineries in California do not have, namely it's free wine tasting. In California, you might pay $10 or $15 for 5 or 6 tastes of wine. But I don't want to talk about wine per se. I'd like to formally welcome the group of Bajans here to Indiana. have made 3 trips down to Barbados, and I'm really thrilled that this is an opportunity to continue the cooperation in this project, a project that's funded by USAID in a cooperative way between Indiana University and the Cave Hill School of Business at the University of West Indies. And along with a trip that was taken in February, this is really the key first steps, excuse me, to work on the cooperation, improve entrepreneurial education and opportunities in Barbados. I'm going to turn it over to Fred for a minute to maybe introduce the team that we have here from Barbados, and then we'll hear from the local entrepreneurs. Fred?
Thanks, Bruce. Again, we're so excited to have you guys here finally. It just seems like a long time since we started this project, and to have you guys here, we're looking forward to this week. And I want to thank DG and his assistant Lori, who's not here today. They did a phenomenal job in bringing all of you together, entrepreneurs and business folks from the Bloomington community. And I think you guys do have incredible stories. I'm looking forward to hearing your stories as well. But just to introduce all of you to the Cave Hill School of Business, the University of West Indies administration and faculty, just so you know who is here listening. And as we have lunch, get the chance to network and to talk to each other. We have Dr. Janine Kama sitting up here in the front. She's the CEO and the director of the Cave Hill School of Business. We have Miss Ann Wallace sitting here in the leather jacket. And she is the director for the academic programs at the Cave Hill School of Business. I'm sorry, and faculty. We have Miss Marjorie Wharton sitting here. She's the Strategic Business Services Director of Cave Hill School of Business. Mr. Brian Toppin, he's a Canada Bajan, and you'll have to ask him what that means next time. So we didn't think he would think it's cold here because he's spent quite a bit of time in Canada. But Brian is a program manager for the Strategic Business Services Unit at the Cave Hill School of Business. Miss Audra Stevenson, sitting up here in front. She is the program manager for the Jobs Initiative, which is this project here that we are cooperating with IU and CHSB. Dr. Paul Pounder, sitting up front here as well. He is a lecturer at the University of West Indies and at the Cave Hill School of Business. And we have Miss Ayana Young Marshall, sitting up here in front as well, who is also a lecturer at the University of West Indies and most notably the coordinator of the SEED program, which I'll let you guys talk to her about that a little bit over lunch. And it's an exciting program in Barbados. I'm sorry? And our resident attorney. So she was looking over that contract they were signing very carefully. Absolutely. And Dr. Alfred Walks, sitting right here. He's a full-time lecturer at the University of West Indies. And so welcome. We look forward to it. I'm going to hand it back over to DG and the presenters for today.
Thank you, Fred. I am going to briefly tell you who's going to be speaking today, but I'm going to let them tell you their story instead of me giving you an extended bio and things like that. We will get to Fred, brief bios, contact information from the folks you're going to hear today, so that if you want to reach out to them via email or cell phone or something like that, you'll be able to connect with them. Because after we spend this time together, having lunch together, hearing people's stories, you may want to connect up together, and so we want to make that available to you. So I'll start out with just letting you know who we're going to be hearing from today. You probably have it on here. The first person that we're going to hear from is Brad Whistler with Sprout Box, and then secondly, we'll hear from Hillary Elmore, who you might notice also has my last name. And then we'll hear from Ann St. John. And then after that, we'll have Bill West from Option 6. And then we will have Max Mulvihill, all right? After that, we'll have Jeff Jones from Solution Tree, and then finally we will conclude with Ed Morris and John Reinhart with Innovative Surgical Design. So I will tell you a little bit about myself, but I really want to get the stories from the other folks because I think theirs are more interesting than mine. But I'll tell you that I went off to college seeking to get a degree in accounting. I had grown up in an entrepreneurial home. My dad was an entrepreneur. We would sit around the dinner table when he was home and talk about business things, what the latest business he was buying or the real estate deal he was doing, when he was practicing law, some things about that. And so I just grew up in sort of this environment of entrepreneurialism. And there was a culture that pervaded our home that was that way. I can remember when I was 15 years old of going around town, this neighborhood I grew up in, and putting flyers in people's doors about wanting to clean their gutters, which are these overhangs on homes. And so my friends and I would get big ladders and we'd climb up 2-3 stories up onto these gutters and clean the leaves out of their gutters so that the gutters, the rain would come down properly. And we made great money doing that because it was high risk and it was adventurous for us. And so we thought that was great. And we had a lot of fun doing that. And that was one of my first entrepreneurial adventures, was doing something like that. So I grew up always doing this. And then when I was, after undergraduate school in accounting, then I went off to law school and MBA school. And coming out of that, I was looking for something to do. And my dad had a company that he had some guys start, and they really messed it up. It was they had committed fraud with the bank, and it was negative cash flowing $25,000 a week, and it was just it was unbelievable disaster. And as one of my dad's friends said, you know, a lot of times a successful entrepreneur helps their children with giving them a successful company, and he found his worst company and said, here, see what you can do with that. And so it was quite an adventure. With the help of a lot of great people and blessings from God, we were able to get it turned around and go in the right direction. And from there, we were able to grow it and get involved in other businesses so that right now, with a lot of great partners, I have businesses that I'm involved with, from minor league baseball teams to publishing and software and manufacturing and all sorts of things. It's a great adventure for us, and we really enjoy it. So. You know, it's been, entrepreneurialism is something that I think that you're going to hear today is something that is pervasive within the culture of a lot of the United States. Some of it is, some of us have grown up with it. Some of us, out of necessity, have had to become entrepreneurs, and you're going to hear that story. And some of us are almost not by plan, but by accident entrepreneurs. But everybody you're going to hear from today has been extremely successful, although I know I can tell for myself that I wouldn't want you to think that everything we have all done has been highly successful. I have my list of failures. We just try and hide those, right? But I've got my long list of companies that I have dumped money into and never really been able to make a difference in, and we have had to flush down the toilet. But today we're going to talk about successes, and that's a lot of fun. And so we're going to start with Brad Whistler, and then Brad, if you just introduce Hillary and Hillary, Ann, and so on and so forth, okay? All right, Brad Whistler.
Well, thank you. Thanks, DG, and thank you all for coming out. It's a pleasure to meet all of you and to get to share with you. And I'm looking forward to hearing from some of you about the things that you're experiencing as well. DG asked me to come just share my story in 10 minutes, which is impossible, but I will do my very best. Like DG said, I think for most of us, entrepreneurship is something that's sort of in your blood. It's in your DNA, and I think most of us who are in entrepreneurship have always sort of had that bug, that desire to do something on our own, to create value for ourselves, for our partners, and the folks that we work with. And much like DG, I grew up with that sort of entrepreneurial spirit. I was always trying to build and sell something, or provide some sort of service to make a buck. Unlike DG, I grew up in a home that wasn't terribly entrepreneurial, but was a very creative family. Most of my family was involved in music and the arts. My dad was an engineer, a very creative and brilliant guy, but he worked for a very big company, the General Motors Corporation, and designed headlamps for a living. And that doesn't sound terribly exciting, but it was very influential on me growing up, seeing the things that he would create. And I remember very clearly when the new style of Corvette came out when I was in high school, and my dad's headlamp was right there on the front. And I had seen the first drawings he made of that headlamp years before. But those types of things that he was creating made a big contribution, but he didn't get to share really equitably in the reward from those contributions. And that really, I think, instilled in me a desire to get out there and help people really strike out on their own, and to be able to have a direct impact on the end product that we're creating, and to really share in the rewards for that. So I had a desire to do that. Didn't really know how or where I was going to apply that spirit until I really got to IU. And I think my story is one of those sort of accidental stories of entrepreneurship. While at IU, I was studying political science and criminal justice, and really didn't know what I wanted to do. But one of the ways that IU was so influential in my life was just the access to technology that it provided. And while I was a freshman and sophomore at IU, the internet was really just starting to mature and become something that had a commercial application. And we had these tremendous computer labs that were open 24 hours a day, and I would spend late nights just playing around with the internet and teaching myself how to build websites, and to learn how to write HTML, which at that time was really the only language. There was you could do a little bit with Java at that point in time, but most of the technologies that we know today on the internet didn't even exist at that time. So we were really just building very static things on the internet, and I was doing it almost as a creative outlet to try to figure out how could I make something artistic within a very rigid environment. And the timing was just good. I ran into another guy who was also, I kept seeing late at night there at the labs, and together we just started making websites together. And eventually people heard that we could do it, and as other entrepreneurs started to realize the need and the value in having websites for business, people just sort of offered to pay us money to build websites, and we thought, hey, this is great. So we did it, and we did it again and again, and eventually it was a business. And so for years we just built custom websites and built custom web applications. And as the technology evolved, so did our business. We kept pushing ourselves to learn more, to be able to do more within the environment of the web browser, and we built a pretty successful business, albeit one that was not very scalable. And that was one of the first lessons that I learned in business, was that, just because somebody's paying you for it doesn't mean it's profitable or scalable. And so we really set out then to apply what we had learned, apply the assets that we had to build something that could scale, that was not build it once and sell it once. We wanted to build something once and sell it many, many times. And so we did. We built a web-based software application in around the early 2000s that was used for managing real estate assets and managing apartment properties, and it allowed for a lot of the things that had traditionally been transactions that had to take place offline to happen now online, and it really accelerated a lot of those transactions and made the process of leasing and moving a lot easier for both property owners and for renters. So we grew that company. In hindsight now, it seems like just a sort of a flash, but over 7 years, we grew that company to be a successful nationwide company, and we sold that company in 2007 in a very successful transaction for us and for our investors. After that, we really wanted to do something to help others in Bloomington do what we had done and do it better than what we had done. And much like Bill Oliver's done here, we wanted Bloomington, we said, why can't Bloomington do what they're doing in California? You know, they were making wine and great software companies in California, and we said, why can't we do the same thing here in Bloomington? And we have such tremendous assets here with access to technology and talent and creativity, and we said there's no reason that we can't really make Bloomington a center for software startups. And so we started Sproutbox, and what Sproutbox does is we help entrepreneurs build software products and get them to the market, and we do that in exchange for equity in their companies. So rather than charging people cash to build software, as I have done for years, we said this is a way that we can really participate, help get products to market faster, and really participate in the long-term upside, the value that's created by those products and by the efforts of the entrepreneurs as they bring that to market. And so that's what we do. We've been doing it for about 2 years, and we've got 11 companies in our portfolio that we've helped bring products to market. All of them are active and growing, and we are just really excited about just the energy that we've seen and the new talent that we've been able to attract here to Bloomington, and we think that there's no reason we can't keep doing this for a long time, and years from now look back and say, we really changed the face of entrepreneurship in Bloomington and in the Midwest. So, am I under 10 minutes? Perfect. Wow. All right. Hey, I did it. So what I'd like to do now is I'm going to introduce the next presenter, Hillary Elmore, and I'm happy to answer questions when we have a break. I don't know if we're doing any Q&A in the... We are late towards the end. Okay, all right. Well, I have to take off early. I've got another meeting to get to, but I'm happy to answer questions if we have a break before I leave. Let me introduce Hillary Elmore. Hillary is now the CEO of one of those companies in our portfolio, and Hillary is another product of Indiana University and the technology at Indiana University. Hillary received a degree from our School of Informatics and Computer Science and is now the CEO of Code Together, LLC, a company that provides a great web-based tool to other technologists. So, Hillary Elmore.
Thanks, Brad. Well, as you've probably figured out, I grew up in Bloomington because DG's my dad, and kind of like him and a little bit like Brad, I did grow up in a very entrepreneurial environment. We talked a lot about business at the dinner table, but we're also kind of creative, and so there's this one Christmas dinner we were having, and we went from singing the songs from Dr. Seuss' How the Grinch Stole Christmas to talking about the spread on the Treasury bonds and the economic policies. I mean, so I've just grown up very exposed to all these business ideas. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I actually got my undergraduate degree at Carleton College in international relations and French. Obviously not at all related to what I'm doing now. I thought I wanted to go into law, worked at a law firm for a year after I graduated, decided I didn't want to go to law, and I found out about the IU School of Informatics. So I came back here, got my master's degree in human-computer interaction design, which is a really long name for making software more usable. I do lots of usability studies, look at how people use software, how they want to use software, how they can't use it, and then I try to come up with ideas to fix it. So that's kind of my background. While I was getting my grad degree, I actually interned with Sproutbox right as they were starting out in early 2009, late 2008. And I worked on a product, actually Brad's home Sprout product called Schedule Thing, and I designed the user interface for it. And so I got to see the process of, how does Sproutbox make a product work? What do they go through, and what's the model for, okay, I have this idea for a software product, how am I gonna, where am I gonna go with this? So I got to be involved in that whole process. At the end of that, I got my graduate degree and started working for another startup here in town called Veer West. They have a product called Form Assembly, which is an online form builder. So I don't know if you all know HTML or how much you know, but it's pretty easy to build a form and just type it out in HTML and put it on your website and just leave it there. But the problem is, if you're having hundreds and hundreds of people fill this form out, it just comes to your email, and what are you going to do with it? It sits in your email. So Form Assembly took this problem of, oh my gosh, I've got all this data, I can't do anything with it, and built a back end for it so that all the data that comes in is on a database, and all you have to do, though, is click a button, say, add a question, type your question in, choose multiple choice or whatever, and it makes the form for you. So this business was a little bit more built up. It's been going for about 3 or 4 years. And so at this point, I got to see kind of, okay, so we've got this product. How are we going to market it? What are we going to do to make our customers more happy? How are we going to get more customers? How are we going to prevent people from leaving? So I got kind of the middle stage of the company. It's not huge, but it's profitable and could go through some more changes. So I did that for the past 2 years. And then at the end of February, so 3.5 weeks ago, I left that company and took over at Code Together, or Squad. Code Together is the company, Squad is the product. Squad is an online collaborative code editor. So if you know Google Docs, it's a lot like Google Docs for programmers. It lets them share their coding, their documents that they're coding on in whatever language they're using with other programmers who can then open that link in a web browser and see exactly what you're typing, where you're typing, can type with you, and there's also a chat thing. So it's very geared towards helping people make software when they're in totally different areas. It's also really good for new coders, new programmers who don't really know what they're doing and need some help. Just to back up a little bit, Squad is, as Brad mentioned, one of Sproutbox's companies. And it was first launched in 2009, October 2009, I think, sort of. And it was launched by one of the other founders of Sproutbox, Mike Trotsky. And Mike did a really good job with it. It was always his kind of this idea that he'd always had of, I really want people to be able to code together. But Mike has had a lot of other responsibilities with Sproutbox, so it kind of got left by the wayside. So about January of this year, my dad and I decided we'd been looking for a company for me to buy because I'd grown up with this entrepreneurial spirit. I didn't want to work for anyone else. I wanted to work for me. I'm a little type A like that. So we'd been looking for a company, and Brad mentioned to my dad that they were looking for someone to take over Squad. And we said, well, maybe we'll just buy it. And so we did. And so for the past month, I've been working on Squad. It is fully functional, but it has some pretty serious bugs. Only 2, but they're serious. So I've just been working on kind of getting the business set up to run as its own business again, dealing with all sorts of things that I never really thought about before, like payroll and leasing an office and, figuring out how to set up health benefits for employees, which I don't have yet, but I will eventually, actually next week. So there's just been this, I have squad that I want to work on, but I'm also getting the other side of, this is a business, doesn't matter what the product is, how do I keep this business running? So I've talked to more people this past month than I think I ever have in a single month before. But it's been great. It doesn't sound like it's that creative, but it really is, because I've got to, find my problems, figure out what I can do, what I can do about them, and then go do it. So it's been a very proactive month, I feel like. I did hire a developer. He's going to start on Monday, and I'm so glad, because I know I do some coding, but I don't know how to fix these problems. So I really am excited about this developer who's going to help me fix the problems. And hopefully we're going to get those fixed in about the next 2 months. And then this summer, I'm going to really start marketing the product so that I can get more customers. We have 4 customers right now, 4 or 6. That's not a whole lot of revenue. So this summer, I'm going to go to a number of conferences, give some presentations, and just try to meet people. The conferences I'm going to go to are full of coders. Everyone in those conferences codes every day. So my goal is to just meet people and talk to them and get them to come to the product so that they can use it and think it's awesome and go tell their friends. One of the great things about Squad is that because it's all about sharing, and helping other people code, it's kind of by its nature viral. And so the hope is that I can get one person to use it who was at the conference, and they can share with someone else. So I'm just really hoping that's going to work, and I think it will. I just got to make those contacts. So, and from there, I don't really know where we'll go. We'll take that bridge when we come to it. So, yeah, that's my story. And speaking to you next is Aiden St. John from St. John Associates.
We're going to take a wild fear in the road because D.G. Elmore is not my father. I wish he was, but he's not. And I should probably come clean about a couple things. The first thing is I had no idea that I was supposed to talk for 10 minutes. They didn't tell me that. I thought I was going to be on a panel and ask, you guys would ask questions and anybody on the panel could answer. And I think that's important to mention because I think part of the entrepreneurial spirit is always to say yes. Yes, I will help you. Yes, I will do that. Yes, I will look into that. I think that's a really good place to start, is with yes. So the fact that I just said yes, I think is a good place to start. I could not have gotten into the Kelley School of Business even if DG were my dad. I did not grow up in an entrepreneurial household. I did not like school. I did not do well. I did not talk about business at the dinner table. Actually, when I was 11 years old, I was living in Chicago, and the Time magazine did its cover story on the neighborhood that I was living in at the time, and it said that it was the most dangerous neighborhood in the United States. And that's where I got my education. And I got a very good education, but it wasn't the kind of education that would have gotten me into the Kelley School. I wish that I could tell you that I really had a great plan for starting a business, but I can't really say that either. I don't think I'm going to maybe get invited back. But my husband and I worked for a recruiting firm. We recruit physicians for hospitals across the country. That's what we do. And we worked for another company, and we did not like how the gentleman did business. We found he just didn't do it the way that we would do it. And of course, we thought we could do it better. So we went to the owner and we asked him, may we purchase your business? And about 3 seconds later, we were fired. So now my husband and I were out of work, and this was in 1991. And, oh, by the way, we had 4 children. They wanted to eat. The whole eat, mortgage cycle. And so we had to do something. So we said, well, okay, we know how to recruit. That's what we do. We know how to recruit. So we were in aerospace and defense at the time, but then peace broke out in the world, and it was really wonderful for the world, very bad for business. All of the Star Wars things, bye-bye. So we had to go into another market, and we decided to go into physicians because physicians are so highly documented. You can get them on a disc. You want to know all the internal medicine physicians in the country, you can buy that information. Unlike scientists who you can't really buy that. It's an electrical engineer, but you don't know what they do. So we decided to crawl into our basement because, the other part was we were broke. And so we crawled into our tiny little basement on Woodyard Road, and I can't find anything as small as it was. We had 4 children, and we had them in a room where the bunk beds touched. The room was so small. And we decided that from the very beginning that the reason we wanted to buy the company was because we wanted to have a very small, well-functioning, not a lot of turnover, which is just massive in our industry. Turnover is massive. Highly compensated group of individuals. That's what we wanted. And 19 years later, that is exactly what we have. We have stayed absolutely true to our vision for what it was that we wanted. And partly my education comes in handy, not for the lack of it, but I think I have about a 3rd grade education, really. I went to college, I got a diploma somehow. And, but really at about 3rd grade, I think my education stopped. And that's been really helpful to me, because I think one of the things that has served us well in our business, and one reason that we haven't faltered so badly, is that I have a profound respect for the basics. I'll walk into a restaurant, for example, and the first thing I notice is, do they have crown molding? It's that stuff that, the wood around ceilings. Do they have that? And it's pretty true. If it has this crown molding, it will probably be out of business in a very short amount of time because they did not respect the fundamentals of math. They did not respect the 3rd grade, okay, I have to somehow pay for that crown molding. I have to take that crown molding, and if I'm selling pizzas, I have to sell enough pizzas to pay for the crown molding. And if you're a 3rd grade mind like me, I just always think in those terms. I have to pay for this, I have to pay for this, I have to pay for this. So my husband and I are very debt adverse. Actually, I am, and I run our money, so. We started very slowly, and we expanded as we could. We have no plans for world domination. We are very interested in doing our jobs very well, and we do. It is very important to us that we do well because we also want to be good stewards to the community that we live in. And a large part of our budget is giving away money, giving to our community, giving to education, giving to cancer research, giving to a lot of things. And I think that it's also important to think about what kind of business you want to be. Not just what you're going to do, but how you're going to do what it is that you're going to do. And I think that's something that we have done well. We hire by the friends and family plan. I'm not that good of an interviewer to know in an hour interview if somebody's going to be good at the job or not. I don't know how to do that. Some people interview really well. Some people interview really poorly. But that doesn't mean that they're going to, in the long run, be a good or not good fit. So if you're a friend or our family and we want to expand our business, we go to you. And we ask, okay, this is a job we want somebody to do. Who do you know that could fill that job? Because we are looking for a type of person. We are not necessarily looking for a skill. We figure we can train them, and we do, but if they don't have integrity or work ethic, there's nothing I can do about it. So that's the kind of people that we hire, and we have very, very, very little turnover because of that. These people have been interviewing for 20 years, 30 years, and let me see, what else could I tell you that might be helpful to you? We really aren't into world domination, and I think that's an important point. Because a lot of times, large companies get a lot of accolades, but tiny companies don't. And I really think that tiny companies oftentimes are the ones that are holding it all together, holding the community together, the whatever together, taking care of people. So I think size is a very poor judge of success. And I'm not just saying that because I have 25 people on a payroll. I'm saying that because I really believe that. And I also think that success is about how you feel at the end of the day. Were you good to your employees? Were you good to yourself? Were you good to the environment? Do you have time for the most important things in your life? And I also think that one thing that formal education does not stress, that life does stress, is that your job can become every single thing that you do. It can become your whole life. And at the end of your life, you still have to answer the question, did I spend that wisely? And maybe you did, but that's a question that if I were talking to business people that were starting a business, I would say, make sure that your life is not, make sure that you have a wonderful life and put your business into that life, not your life into your business. Because it will suck up every single dime, every idea, every emotion, and they'll pay you well for it. They will give you awards, and at the end of the day, you still are not fulfilled. So I would just ask the question about having a fulfilling life. And that is another thing that Michael and I have done. The most important thing to me is that I use my life well. And the second most important thing to me is that I have a fairy tale romance. And I work with my husband, so that is no small feat. And oh, by the way, he's married to me, which again is no small feat. But I think it's a really good point to, when you're talking about business, to talk about your life, because we often don't bring that part into it. And that's been something that I think I've done very well, is to have a successful business and have a successful life as I would define success. So, thank you. And I am to introduce a break.
Is that right? Okay. We can do one more? Okay.
We can do one more.
Go West.
The West. Come on down. Woo-hoo!
Thank you. Very excited to meet with you guys. I was actually more excited when I thought it was going to be in Barbados instead of Bloomington. Absolutely love that island. In fact, I love any place south of 19 degrees latitude. My passion is sailing, and so actually getting back down there in a couple months with my son to do it once again. And my career has been very much focused on my passion. I think what I'm doing right now is very much focused on allowing me to live out the passion, the sailing, and the things that I really enjoy doing most. Didn't grow up an entrepreneur. I started computer science, early 1980s, good math student. Computers was where you wanted to go. came to IU, used punch cards the first year I was here, so literally grew up as the desktop computer grew up. Getting out of IU, as a young, inspired individual, the first thing I did was go to the big city. That was where you're going to get your real experience. So I went to Chicago with Arthur Andersen. Big buildings, walnut walls, white shirts, ties. They work you to death, and you learn to take risks in that kind of environment. They have a up or out policy. Either you make it to the next level of promotion or you're out. No bones about it. So every 3 months of your career there was sort of this new challenge that you had to try to face. Did the big city thing in Chicago and Philadelphia, and then had an opportunity to join my first entrepreneur, a gentleman who similarly had a medical background and a computer background, and saw an opportunity to develop databases for the medical community. It was an object-oriented database, which was way above the evolution of computers at that time. He hired me. I was among 20 people at the group, and I got to see an entrepreneur in action for the first time. He challenged me. He sent me to Miami. He sent me to Chicago, wherever he needed me to be. But I got to watch what he was doing. And my first exposure to the islands was when he challenged us to help him earn a certain degree of revenue. I think it was $2 million at the time. That if our group could earn $2 million for the company, he was going to take us all on a cruise. And we did, and it was great because very inspiring. We had a picture of a cruise ship on the wall, and they would fill in boxes as we got more and more closer to our goal. And it took us down to the Bahamas, and it was the first time I saw the islands and just fell in love. And I remember at the time going, somebody down here needs a computer. Thinking, this is exactly where I want to be. I watched him double the size of the company. He sold it then to Ernst & Young. So I was back into what they called the Big Six at that point. Now white ties, white shirts, ties, once again, big buildings, walnut walls. And they staffed me in a position here at Indiana University, where I had gone to school. The project went exceptionally well, and they offered me a position at the foundation to oversee their technology. And I saw it as an opportunity to finally move to a location where incomes were good, cost of living was low, and I call it a high IQ of the community. I could afford to buy a house finally and start a family, which you can't do in Chicago or Philadelphia if you're a young man. And so I worked at the foundation, learned a little bit more, and had another opportunity to join an entrepreneurial organization in 2000. There was a height of the dot-com era in Chicago. And they saw Bloomington as the same opportunity that I saw Bloomington. They were very, very well funded. $200 million they raised in a 3-year period. Larry Ellison was on the board. Mike Milcom was on the board. And their goal was to build an online MBA program. They wanted the Ivy League online MBA program, so we partnered with Stanford, with Columbia, Carnegie Mellon, some really, really solid schools. But the issue is they were in Chicago, and they couldn't find the people fast enough to do what they wanted to do. So they looked at Bloomington the way I looked at Bloomington. High IQ, low cost of living, the ability to have really good resources from the university. I was fortunate to be here. The gentleman who was in charge of development was actually a partner that I had worked for at Arthur Andersen. So I saw his name and I called up and said, "Hey Larry, I'm down here." He goes, "I'll be here tomorrow. Why don't you stop by?" The next day I had an offer, and he goes, "We need to start right away." So we did. We were able to go to the university, tap into the local community, and hire instructional designers from the School of Education, writers from the School of Journalism, and a bunch of multimedia people from the School of Informatics. So being close to the university in an environment like this allowed us to tap into the resources. I equate it to, if you're an oil company, you're going to locate wherever the oil is. Well, if you're a company like ours that focuses on intellectual property, you're going to focus on where the intellectuals are. That was a whole lot of fun being part of a dot-com for 18 months until they ran out of money, like every other dot-com ran out of money in the country. Closed shop. We built some great training programs, but we all got pink slips. That was my opportunity to try to take a risk, bring the group back together, and see if we could make a go at it. You couldn't pay me enough to do it again. It was the hardest thing in my life. I mortgaged the house twice. Went a year without a salary. Found a few people within that group that were so dedicated they were willing to work as contractors on an as-needed basis. After about 9 months, I finally could hire them as employees, but only guarantee them 50% salary. We got really, really close as often as we could. And then it was about a year, 6 months or so later, we were able to finally guarantee them full pay. What we did and what we do now is build custom training. So we took the instructional designers, the writers, and the online people, and we built online courses for corporations. So for our clients, we might build compliance courses or sales courses or product courses and such. We knew we were successful at the end of year 2 when we were able to give bonuses and pay back all of that salary that our staff had missed. It was a hell of a risk and a lot of effort. As part of a group here that's so highly talented, and as the internet grew, our client base isn't in Bloomington. Our client base is barely in Indianapolis, although Eli Lilly is one of our largest clients there. Our client base is worldwide. We're able to fill that from Bloomington because of the internet, because of email. Microsoft is one of our largest clients. That took some, you guys use the term cojones in the islands? We literally walked into Microsoft without any meetings, without any contacts, and just said, here's what we do. There's bound to be somebody here who needs this service, and got introduced to one woman who happened to have one little $10,000 project, and she goes, hey, I'll try you guys out. She had a colleague that had a $30,000 project. Somebody in a woman sat in the room who then oversaw all of engineering's training for Microsoft and said, hey, I like your work, why don't you come in? And Microsoft became our largest client. I think that starting with the consulting career and that 3-month cycle of being put in that situation where it's up or out, in addition to education, gave me that cold spine to be able to step up and say, hey, I can do this. The company did very well. I'm most proud of the fact that we have people that are well paid. They're able to buy houses here and raise families. And we were acquired a year ago by a company that is the #1 training outsource company in the world, a company called General Physics, $500 million publicly traded company. And that's been an experience. It's an experience of sort of fighting now the urge as an entrepreneur to be part of a larger corporation. Preserve what I built, do not sacrifice the company, its people, and what it's doing, but at the same time try to get it to the point where eventually as an entrepreneur I can start looking for the next thing that I want to do. And it's all about passion. It's all about the islands and the sailing. My son also got certified a year ago. We're headed back there in June. And so what I aspire to right now is whatever lifestyle is going to allow me to do what really, really motivates me. So that's my story. Thanks.
I'm in the 3-2 program. It's kind of this thing we have. It's like 3 years of undergrad, 2 years of MBA. So technically I'm an MBA student. I don't have my undergraduate degree yet, but I'll say I'm an MBA student because I'm paying graduate school tuition. So, and yes, I'm young. I have this clothing company that I'll tell you a little bit about. I don't claim to really know anything yet. I really have no idea what I'm doing with entrepreneurship. I kind of just stumbled into this. So I'll just kind of walk you through some things I've done and maybe we'll get something from it. When I was in high school, I didn't even want to go to college. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I guess I was pretty smart. My brother was doing engineering. I could do calculus, so I thought maybe I'd do that. Never really been inspired by anything. My dad is an electrician at a steel mill. My mom worked part-time from Portage, Indiana. It's a steel mill town. Nothing that interesting there. But my mom got involved in some franchises when I was about 13 years old. And her first year, she made $500 in profit off the franchises. And they started to expand, and she started to expand and buy more. And it's a Curves franchise, if you're familiar with the franchise. It's a women's workout facility. So it's a pretty cool company, and they had a bunch of years of great growth. So, you know, she went from $500 of profit to $250,000 of profit and things like that as she expanded her. You know, she ended up owning 3 franchises at one time. So I saw that, and I saw the possibilities, and I kind of started thinking, I could do some business. I could buy some franchises. I could learn to run them. So I kind of signed up for the Kelly School, not really knowing what I got myself into. And another friend of mine from my hometown, he was doing Kelly School too. He's an entrepreneurship major. He's a senior, and we wanted to do business. And so my first experience with entrepreneurship was we started a promotional products company on campus. I think this is something that a ton of Kelly School of Business students have done. It's really a great town to do something like this. if you're familiar with Kelvin Sampson, we made a T-shirt called Samson can call, or it said Samson can call me anytime, and we went out in front of Assembly Hall, and we sold this T-shirt to students coming into Assembly Hall. Incredibly illegal for one, and we only did this. We did this once, and I don't remember. We stood out there with like a wagon full of T-shirts and like a price tag on it, and we sold them. We literally left our first time selling these going into Assembly Hall our freshman year here with like $4,000 in our pocket. So in like a matter of like 45 minutes, we made $4,000 selling T-shirts, and we kept this going. We started talking to people on campus, doing like club T-shirts, promotional products. We had some connections people that did this, so we got and did some coffee mugs for some people, and we did some different things. And I think my freshman year of college, we grossed like $50,000 or something really stupid. Like, didn't even put any effort into this. Like, I don't even know how we did it. So that kind of sparked my interest in just doing these things. And I knew something about apparel. And okay, I guess there's kind of there's more of a segue into this. I went with the emerging markets trip to Ghana my sophomore year, and I kept in touch with people in Ghana. I brought back some fabric, and this is just through Kelley School of Business. I went with a group of students, and I had somebody turn the fabric that I brought back into a pair of shorts. And they were really cool, and I just wanted to wear them. And it was like this traditional Ghanaian fabric, pretty like beach shorts, really awesome. And I wore them for like a year. No, I never like thought I could sell these or anything. And my neighbor at the time he's a fashion designer, and he did graphic design, interested in that stuff. And he started telling me about, business, like starting a clothing company. I was like, okay, whatever, I could do this. I'm interested. And then I didn't even think of it. And he started talking about making it branded as like a men's apparel company. It's kind of branded around world travel, airlines and these things. And he had a logo. And I showed him this pair of shorts. I was like, what about this? This is cool. And so he really loved it. And he's like, we can build a brand around this. So this was like a year later. I was like, okay, let's do it. And for like 6 months, we just talked about it. We had a logo and an idea, and we were entrepreneurs, so we had a business. And we decided we had to start trying to make this. So I called up my friends in Ghana that I kept in contact with, and I was like, we sent them over some samples of some shorts, and we asked if they could make them, and they said, sure, we can make them, no problem. We were so like, I don't know, naive, or we got back like garbage. We didn't know what we were doing, and we did some graphic T-shirts, and we ordered like the bulk quantity because it was a discount, and like we spent all our money. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't have a website yet. We started making a website. That's a good story too. Somebody referred us to some guy in India, and we had this guy in India building our website. And there's one takeaway: you never ever do any kind of graphic design or anything that's going to sell your product. You spend all your money on that. Like, spend as much as you can designing a website or an e-commerce function. Don't have it done in India for $500 because you'll never get it, and you won't ever get a refund if you want your money back. And so we did that, and we huh?
Do it in Barbados instead.
Okay, we'll try. We still had nothing at this point, so some months went by. We were out of money. We didn't know what we were doing. We kept sending away for more samples, spent a bunch of money at FedEx, probably like, I don't know, over $1,000 shipping stuff back and forth with FedEx. And we were stuck, and some guys in town here that own Avers Pizza, they saw what we were doing, and they kind of bored, and they had extra cash, and they gave us enough money to travel over to Ghana again and start networking with people, trying to figure out how we could get things manufactured. And we should have spent a ton of time there, and that's where we should have been in the beginning when we first had this idea, but we went and we spent 10 or 12 days there or something, met a bunch of tailors, had some samples made. We were trying to work with small tailors because we didn't really know what to do with a big manufacturing shop or warehouse or whatever. So we did that. We got great product. We finally made a great network over there. We had people to call on to manufacture our stuff. And still, when we left, nothing ever got done. As soon as we left, and as soon as we were back here in the States, we couldn't seem to we couldn't manage the people that we had made connections with. They weren't really making our stuff. Excuses kept coming up, and so that was a struggle. And I had to go back, and I spent like Christmas over there, and I lived with my friends we made, and I spent like 20 days over there just in December, and I'll be back on Friday, so next Friday, and we've just been doing that ever since. We have a great website now. We've made sales. small. We're trying to build up. We're trying to make links with people around the world. There's some guys in Paris making shoes in West Africa, and they have like 5 pairs of sneakers, and we were trying to like partner with them. We're looking into some different partnerships with people that have figured out how to manufacture apparel in Africa, but we're now working with a larger manufacturing firm that they do like huge runs of 10,000 pairs of pants and stuff, but they're working with us because they know what we're trying to do. So yeah, they can do like a few hundred products or like small amounts for us, and they put a lot of time into it, and it's really great. So that's kind of where we're at. We hope to grow organically, but spending so much time in Ghana, I mean, I kind of see myself as a serial entrepreneur now. I've been involved, like, spending so much time there. I've met so many people. I'm involved in now starting a franchise there, potentially like this cocoa farm. I might like own a piece of this cocoa plantation, which would be pretty awesome. So I hope to do more and more over there. I've linked like a multinational sports firm with some contacts in West Africa that I can pull commission off of when they do deals there. So just that experience alone has opened up so many doors for me. And I'm involved in a little tech venture in Palo Alto too, as well, with some kids that are designing some software programs and stuff. So I just hope to keep this going. I don't know if I see the clothing company getting huge. I hope it turns into maybe a $200,000-$300,000 a year company, and I can use that to keep moving on and doing the other things I love to do as well. And I got involved recently with Fred Perry with the Institute of International Business, and I linked up some MBAs with him, I linked up some MBAs with my people in Ghana just a few weeks ago, and hopefully we keep building up that relationship as well. That's it. And I think Jeff is next from Solution Tree.
My name is Jeff Jones, and I live here in Bloomington. I grew up in northern Indiana. I've tried to escape Indiana several times. I keep coming back, and I've landed in a great town. I'm going to give you a little bit of background, but mostly talk about where the company is and what we're doing today. My father owned his own business. I wouldn't really say he was an entrepreneur, but he owned his own business. He bought a business, managed it, and lived the lifestyle that he wanted to live, and it's a great lifestyle. Raised 4 of us, and we all felt very protected and loved. But it wasn't the kind of dinner table where we talked about business. He talked about our grades, or he talked about our activities, or he talked about family and function. I had good enough grades to get into Indiana University because I knew that's where I wanted to go to school. I was really never pushed on anything. The student athletics that we had in northern Indiana were basketball and baseball and basketball and baseball. And so I did play a little bit of golf, those type of things. But what I really liked to do was work at the car wash when I was 13 years old and work at my father's print shop and run a printing press for him. And so when I came to Indiana University, I got a job in college because I like to work as well. Joined a fraternity, got to know a lot of other guys that were very, very successful. After school, pursued a business career. Came back and worked at Indiana University and twice at Dartmouth College and at Tufts in fundraising and development work. Had worked my way around and got tired of, don't mean this in any bad way, the bureaucracy of higher education, and I didn't get along so very well because I did have a lot of entrepreneurial desires and skills. So I'd gone into financial services, and my wife and I just had a brand new little baby, and we were back visiting my good friend D.G. Elmore, whom I'd known for years. And he and I just had some quiet time. We're talking in the morning. He has several children, and Hillary, you may have been one of them running around at the time. And I said, so what are you doing now? What are you buying? What are you doing? He said, I bought a couple more travel agencies we're going to merge into, and I bought this publishing company. I said, publishing? You don't know anything about publishing. Why are you getting into the publishing business? He said, yeah, I don't. So I'm looking for a president. He lists off all the characteristics. And I said, well, that's my resume. And he said, yeah, I want you to come back and work for me. And before he finished, I said, no, I'm not coming back to Bloomington again. I finally got out. But we looked at this company, and he and I spent several months talking about the financials, the product, and a feel-good company. It provides, the core business was publishing books at the time. And what we did was publish books for educators on schools of at-risk youth or on the principles of at-risk youth and school improvement. So that's what the company did, and DG and I bought it together back in 1998. We've built the company up over the last several years, so we've run it for 14 years and it's going strong. What we found when we bought the company was there are a lot of things that we couldn't find out in the due diligence process. For instance, we couldn't talk to the authors because if you had spoken to the authors and the sale falls through, they would have left the publisher. You couldn't talk to the employees because if the employees think you're going to sell the company, they might leave. You couldn't dig into the inventory too much because they can't have you wandering around the warehouse. And what we found out after we bought the company was that the authors hated us, the employees were unhappy, and the inventory was a disaster. So they hid things very well. So we had a lot of work to do when we bought the company. It was, we lost a lot of money in the first 2 years, at least a lot to us. DG and I funded it equally, 50-50. We put our money in and we came to an agreement after one more cash call that this was it. If we don't make it after this, we just don't make it. Which was a little bit harder pill for me to swallow than DG because I had moved my wife from the East Coast who had never seen Indiana before we moved there. We had sold our house in Massachusetts. We had a house. Baby number 2 was on its way. We had everything that we really had invested in this. So that became to me what the core of entrepreneurship was, is you just have to do whatever you have to do to make it work. If this is what you're going to do with your life, then it's going to be successful, and there really was no option. Failure was not an option in this company. We didn't have any choice. I had babies growing up. I had a partner. I had a life. We went, at one point I went for 11 months without a salary. We had employees that needed salaries. Luckily, we had some savings left from when we had moved from Massachusetts to Indiana. So you just kind of grind it out. So if I had to find out what the drivers were in our business, what was our core competency, what are we going to do? Well, a few things that we did was we realized that the customer was right. Think of yourself as the customer. How do you want to be treated if you were the author on the other end? How do you want your publisher to treat them? The other thing we did was we had no idea what industry norms were, so we didn't follow them. We made up our own norms. We did what we thought was right, not what the industry has done. So we made our own path. We treated the authors as the #1 customer. Integrity was critical in our company, and we knew what the drivers were, and we had laser focus on what those drivers were. We pared down the staff from attrition. We let people go if they were not able to keep their jobs, but we didn't just come in and cut staff across the board to save money. We worked our way to the size staff that we needed to have. 10 years ago now, we had 7 employees at Solution Tree. We'll hit 170 employees probably next month at Solution Tree. We had really one Tier 1 author in our stable, or author group, 2 guys. We now are the largest publisher of Tier 1 authors in the United States across the country because our best author solicitation was our current customer, was our author. We treated them so well and made sure that every promise that we made was fulfilled. We would sit down with them on an annual basis and go through their business plan. What do you want to do next year? We do this, I'd do this in August and September. What do you want to do next year? Here's our plan. Here's how we'd like to grow your business. We'd like to grow it into DVDs or videos at the time. We'd like to have more speaking engagements. We want to build a 2-day conference, a 3-day conference around your work. We want to build trainers that can speak on your work so that you don't speak on your work all the time, but we'll pay you every time they go out. They receive money every time we receive money. We take a little bit of everything what they make, and they get the bulk of the money, because our job is to have lots of authors versus just riding one horse and make a lot of money off an author, and so we've gotten to that point. So as by treating our authors as the #1 customer, and that's who we work for, they then tell their author or other friends, you need to publish with these guys. Or if you're going to come to me and say, I've got this book idea, who's your publisher? Well, you need to go talk to Solution Tree because they're the best in the business as far as taking care of your customers. We were just at a big trade show last week in San Francisco, the largest in the country. And one of our top 4 authors came up to our booth afterwards and said, I need a little Jeff Jones. I need a little Solution Tree. I said, what do you mean? He says, they're not there to help me set up my room. I can't figure out my AV. There's nobody to take the evaluations. But when we do a conference, we take care of everything. The author walks in, everything's set up. They do their thing. We do our thing. Everybody walks away happy, and the customer happy, the paying customer as well as the author, who's our #1 customer. So we had to figure out what our drivers were. We had to focus on our culture. We had to really have a laser focus, and then you expand accordingly. We would expand it, bring on another author or another application. We like to say that if you have the old Motorola flip phones, and if you have an iPhone, well, they're both telephones. They both do the same thing. A traditional publisher is the flip phone. Solution Tree is the iPhone because we have lots of applications. We get your materials out there in any and every way that we possibly can. We find new venues. Right now going into the online business, online courses for educators, but we're doing it through the authors. Instead of doing it through a course on assessment, we're doing it on Tom Guskey's assessment, and he's the celebrity, he's the rock star. So we have a few rules that we have to live by as entrepreneurs, and one is that cash is more important than oxygen because you can buy oxygen. So you have to have cash flow. You have to manage your cash flow. You have to keep things going. You have to have good books. You have to keep things nice and tidy because it can get away from you. The other thing is that you can work, when you're an entrepreneur, I learned very quickly that you get to work half days. And sometimes you get to choose what 12 hours those days are in your day. And the last thing is you have to stay focused to your mission. Whatever your mission is, you have to stay focused on it because it's very easy to get distracted because the more successful you are or the more successful you are, the more opportunities that come to you. And as Jim Collins wrote in Good to Great, there's lots of ways to make money, but if you don't stay true to your mission, you're going to get distracted, then everything's going to go away. And we've tried very, very hard over the years. And as a CEO of a company now with 170 employees, my main job is to keep the company focused on the mission of the company and the vision of the company. And don't let us get distracted with lots of other opportunities because they're out there. So you have to have your mission, vision, values, and your end goal in sight, and you have to stick to those. So DG and I have had a great run together for 14 years. I've gotten involved in some of his other companies, but my passion is work. I love to work. It's just what I do. I try not to neglect my kids. I try not to neglect my wife. But what I love to do is work, and I'll always do it whether it's this or something else. And I think an entrepreneur has to like to work. If they don't like to work, then go work for a bureaucratic system someplace. And who's next? Ed.
It's going to be a tough act to follow. Nice job. I'm Ed Morris. My background is a little bit different. I actually graduated from a school a little bit north from here called Purdue. It's recognized as one of the better engineering schools in the United States. And so I did not come from a family of entrepreneurs. I came from actually a family of educators, and my mom was an artist. So going into business was something that wasn't talked about around the dinner table, but it was something that did come naturally to me. I owned a screen printing business when I was in high school. I had a lawn mowing business and did paper routes as I was growing up. So all of those things were natural drivers within my life. When I left Purdue University, I went to Detroit and I worked in the automotive industry. I did not design headlights. I actually was in seats and seating restraint systems, which was a relatively regulated portion of the automobile industry. So we had a lot of testing and there was a lot of bureaucracy that we had to follow in order to get our seats approved for the National Highway Association. My breakaway from the automotive industry actually came when we had our first child, and General Motors was wanting to pull me back from Wisconsin, where I was relatively happy, and they wanted to move me back to Detroit. And my wife and I just had our first child, and we'd actually both grown up in Bloomington. So Bloomington was a natural place for us to come back to. All of our parents were still alive at that time. So we moved back here to have our first child, which was 14 years ago. And I started work for a medical device company, which is also run by a very successful entrepreneur, Bill Cook. I worked for Bill Cook for 2.5 years, and I worked on a wide range of products for the Cook company, including coronary guide wires, new procedures in spine, radiographic devices for treating cancer or tumors, And I left the company really not because there was it was actually a terrific company to work for. It just wasn't a fit for me. I did have an entrepreneurial spirit, and it just wasn't working a day-to-day 9-to-5 job. Just wasn't enough for me. And so I left there and I started with an interventional radiologist in Philadelphia, a small company that he was just starting. He needed an engineer to come in and run his project development. So ran a product for him that actually cleaned out grafts that people would use for dialysis. And so we were very successful there. I left his company really because I was commuting back and forth at the time from here to Philadelphia, and it was just a little bit difficult on a young family. And I did two things at that point. One, I started a company with my brother and an interventional neuroradiologist out of Tampa, and we started a company which treated fractures in patients' vertebrae. So patients who have osteoporosis or soft bones can actually fracture their vertebrae, and it's a debilitating pain. And a new procedure was just coming out, which I had been involved with for some time, and then stayed connected through some of my connections with Cook. But that new procedure needed kits and equipment put together, and so we developed a kit that was actually one of the best-selling kits in the United States today for vertebroplasty. We developed that company in about 9 months, and from 9 months from the inception of the company, we'd actually already sold it to a strategic. And so it was an exit within 9 months. From there, I obviously wanted to continue to grow companies. We had some other technologies that we were working on. There was a biologic material which Cook had just licensed from Purdue University. And so I worked with Cook to get a sub-license for this new technology. And this technology takes the patient's own or the body's stem cells and recruits them into a matrix. And then that matrix is a series of proteins which then morphs into the body's host tissue. So if it was next to muscle tissue, it would recreate muscle tissue. If it was in our case, we were doing a vascular device, so we were actually regrowing a vessel in the human, in the body. So, and the application was, there was a very growing need for patients who were receiving heart catheterizations, and this is where a physician would take a catheter from the patient's leg, and they would come back up into the heart muscle and treat the vessels in the heart muscles with either balloons and dilating those vessels back open so good circulation would continue, or they'd put a stent in, a metal scaffolding, which would continue after they balloon that to keep that vessel open, so the heart muscle would continue to get good blood flow. The challenge with that was they needed the hole in the leg where they accessed from these catheters going in and out would be problematic for them to try and keep that closed because it was underneath the skin tissue, so you can't see it, and they just have to hold pressure for long periods of time, and the patients would have to stay flat, which would eat up bed space and increase costs. So our product took this biologic, and we pre-mounted it on one of their standard devices that they were using through these procedures called a sheath. It was kind of a working doorway. So we engineered a product to deliver this biologic down to the artery, deploy that biologic in the artery, and then allow them to do their procedure so that at the end of the procedure, when they pulled the sheath back out, the hole would be sealed. And so that's a commercial product that's on the market today. We're still running the company. And in the interim, my brother is actually running that company for me now. I was recruited to come over and start a new company. And that new company is a spine company, and we're actually treating patients who have narrowing. Your spinal canal comes down, and then there are roots that come off of that spine that go down into your lower extremity. And over time, all of us will develop calcium deposits around the openings as those nerve roots come out of the spine core. And that becomes debilitating or at least extremely painful for patients who end up, the calcifications end up squeezing off that nerve root or that information highway. And so we've got a product now that we're working on which has successfully had an outside the U.S. study completed in Russia. We did 19 patients in Russia, and we implant, if this is your vertebral body, which makes up the core of support, there's also a bridge that protects your spinal cord. And what our product does is we actually go in and we cut this, what's called a pedicle, and we cut these pedicles so that those are independent, and then we come in with a implant that actually separates those two. And so it actually alleviates that pressure on the nerve tissue. And this is a product that we'll be hopefully starting our US-based clinical study with this year. So I think I'm a little bit of a mix between an entrepreneur and still an engineer. I still spend a lot of my time engineering and testing, but I also am very familiar with the need to run a business and stay organized. Payroll, watching the funds, it's a really crucial role. And actually that's a great introduction to John Reinhardt, who works with me and does most of that for me. So John, if you don't mind, if you talk about kind of our introduction and what we've done so far together, your background.
Ed's a bit modest. He is an entrepreneur at heart, even though he likes to play that down. I just kind of asked, don't really have anything prepared, but kind of looking at my background, I think you can really divide into really three main parts. Kind of growing up, where I was from, kind of most recently as a JD MBA graduate, and then kind of right now with ISD and where we're going forward with that. I did kind of have an entrepreneurial family and background. I grew up I had my own lawn mowing business, and it was a really good business, and kind of wonder what that could have been built up and built into. But had my grandfather was an oil man in Southern Illinois, and he really had a profound kind of influence on me. He had worked as a geologist at ExxonMobil and was finding oil for them, and kind of said, "Boy, I'm finding oil for Exxon. Why can't I do this on my own? I can make a lot more money doing it." So he decided to kind of go off and work as a wildcatter, and really kind of his stories and listening to him really kind of provided that it was a real positive influence on me to kind of have that same attitude. I think not just being around that, the other important thing that I learned from him was failure's okay. In the 70s, he had a string of, I think it was 16 straight dry oil wells, which at $100,000 a pop, that's a lot of losses right in a row. But he kept going, and he's got a very successful business right now. So I think those are kind of two important lessons. The touch point for entrepreneurship, which I can see the Cave Hill schools really being a part of. I bet you guys have students who are entrepreneurs and they don't even know they're entrepreneurs. I think by being there, you guys can really kind of raise awareness and really be a positive thing for Barbados. Kind of where I've recently been, started out my career as an accountant. I always knew I wanted to be in business and didn't really know how I was going to get there, but I knew accounting and finance were an important part of business. I kind of hopefully keep ISD with cash is king. Cash is the most important thing for any small business, and it'll keep you alive and it'll kill you. So I saw accounting as kind of being, a very important part to that. Worked as a staff accountant for about 6 months, and I started to see the importance of law in business. We had a lot of small business clients, and I worked with a lot of our small business clients and saw kind of how important the law was, and just decided, hey, I want to go to law school and get that background and really build out that skill set, kind of help propel me and prepare me and move me forward. In the JD MBA program, I was fortunate enough to meet DG, and he's been kind enough to kind of provide as a mentor to me. I'm very, very appreciative of that. graduated, and shortly after graduation, I met Ed Morris, and I don't know if you remember this, Ed, but probably one of the first questions, we had kind of an informal interview, and one of the first questions he asked me was, where do you see your career going from here? I said, Ed, I see myself as building businesses. In some form or fashion, I see myself as a kind of a builder. He said, hey, I've got this new project, ISD, it's a med device company, and I think, I didn't say anything, but in my mind I was like, all right, let's do this, let's go. So this was September 2010, and we've kind of been off and running on that. I'm not sure, where I'll necessarily be in 5 or 10 years. I'll hopefully, with ISD that'll be successful, and I'm sure I'll be building, other enterprises and other companies. But one interesting thing Ed and I were talking about, to me this is what entrepreneurship's all about, and I'll kind of end with this. You look at the story of the Oliver Winery, and it really started out as kind of one guy around the table with his friends, making some wine and pouring wine for his friends, and we look out, and that production facility, huge production facility, and what that's become, over the past 40 years. To me, that's kind of what this is all about. So appreciate you guys kind of giving me a few minutes to tell my story, and not sure who I'm supposed to turn it over to at this point. Is this it?
Almost to the close
All
here,
right.
yeah. And actually, thank you guys. Thank you. And I just want to say to the Cave Hill faculty and administration, for you guys to travel 15 hours yesterday and then come here and sit and then drink wine, we should have been giving you coffee. So coffee will be coming, so thank you. But DG had to leave a little early, and even though he's not here, I just want to thank him. I think for the Cave Hill folks, I think you heard today, when I think of a mentor, when we talk about mentorship, DG is that. If you heard it over and over and over again. Everyone here has some connection to DG, and he's been a mentor to me, and I'm not an entrepreneur. So I think it's as an example, I think he's just a wonderful example as a mentor in our community. So thanks to him. Thanks again to Oliver Winery. Wonderful tour that they gave, and we're just thankful that they provided all of this and the wine pretty much free of charge. So we're thankful to them. Again, to all the entrepreneurs and business folks that came today, thank you. Some people had to leave a little early, but thank you very much, and for taking time out of your day to share with us and with our distinguished guests from Cave Hill. Also, I do want to thank Shara Finkminer, who's over here. We didn't introduce her. All of you have met her. But Shara and Mar back at our office have put a lot of time and effort into these events and everything you'll experience this week. So I just want to make sure to recognize them. You all know Mark Long, who just made his way over after teaching class this morning, and you'll see more of him this week. But Dr. Janine Kama, the CEO of Cave Hill School of Business, does want to come up and say a few words. And that'll be the closing. And you guys don't have to leave. We're here. We have a couple more minutes if you want to network a little bit. Sorry we didn't have more time for that, but thank you, Janine.
Thank you. Thanks, Fred. As a good Caribbean child of the soil, it's important that we show appreciation. So I'm going to take the liberty on behalf of my colleagues to say thank you to all of you, first of all, for spending the morning with us and for really allowing us to understand what it is to be in a cold environment. Anyway, I think it would be safe to say that perhaps all 8 of us would have come through some kind of entrepreneurial endeavor in terms of our own family backgrounds. Strange enough, though, in the Caribbean, we tend not to talk about them. We tend to take it for granted, even though we know in today's environment, it really is something that's important, that needs to be spoken about and needs to be celebrated. But we were, I would say, what I had heard as we were walking around on the tour, we were most intrigued and impressed by all of your stories and understanding about your backgrounds. And I think we got some takeaways from it. And if I have left out any, please shout them at me. But I think we understand the importance of networking. And we understand the importance of mentoring, coaching, and involving people who you believe have potential and capacity to be able to work with you and to go on and to spread and build a business. I think we also understand the importance, based on your stories and some who may have left, that the whole question of understanding finance and where finance is coming from and how you use the finance to build and grow the business is also important. What I think we also understood was very important in terms of not only having your core business, but also looking at other possibilities as you continue to be successful. And I particularly like what you had said, Jeff, yeah, in terms of, as the CEO, now really focusing on the vision, the mission, the goals, the outcomes. With 180 staff, you do have the capacity and the flexibility to be able to do that. And I think that is something that we would like to get to as the Cahill School of Business. Interestingly, all of us are faculty or facilitators, and some of us are also administrators. We run a tiny business school in the context of the world, but it is a very important business school in the context of Barbados and the OECS. So we understand very clearly how to multitask. We also feel that our School of Business is, in fact, an entrepreneurial endeavor because we do not get money from the government, or any government, as a matter of fact, or from the university, or from the private sector, unless they feel like giving us a little thing on the side. But everybody wants a little thing on the side, so we perhaps do not get very much. We really have to understand what our core business is and how we drive our business and how we drive our business to grow. And I would say that after 20 years, what is the date today? Okay, so in 17 days, we're going to be 20 years. On the 17th of April, we're going to be 20 years. And we are proud of what we've been able to do. But we like hearing these stories because we also understand, in a very humble context, that we still have a long way to go and a lot more to achieve. But we are going to be slugging at it, and we are going to be trying to drive to ensure that we achieve what we need to achieve. So I want to thank you very much, first of all, Fred, for facilitating this. I also want to thank David, even though he had to leave early. DG. I had to ask him what DG stood for, and I told him that I have a brother and 3 cousins, all of whom named David. And Jessica for giving us the tour, and Oliver Winery, and Shara and Mar, even though we haven't met her yet, but for also organizing this event. So thank you as well to all of you presenters, because as I said, it was valuable for us, and we certainly had a very fruitful and productive first morning here in Indiana. Thank you.